piece, let's look at equipping, how Jesus might call us to be equipped as disciples. First, you've noticed that, you may not have noticed, but we are using a new lectionary this year. A lectionary is a set of readings from the Bible. The one that we had been using is called the Revised Common Lectionary. It's 4 readings a Sunday. It's used by lots and lots of churches. Very familiar. This narrative lectionary, its purpose is to help us get in deeper into the Bible. So you've noticed that the passages tend to be longer. There are inserts in the bulletin for you to take home to read through other pieces of the Bible during the week to get you ready. And the idea is to help us see kind of the swath and flow of the Bible, especially the Old Testament. I'll be honest, this is more preaching on the Old Testament. I've done more preaching on the Old Testament this fall than I've ever done, which is, I think, a real joy and challenge for me. So the narrative lectionary is precisely to encourage deeper study of the Bible. Next one, place Bibles in the pews. We don't have Bibles in the pews, of all things. And so the idea would be, with the narrative lectionary, we'll still print it in the bulletin. Say, open your Bibles to the page, and you can follow along.
Yeah,
exactly, just like that.
And if there's some kids that are too old to go to children's church, but are younger, maybe 6th, 7th grade, you can get them into the Bible more.
Yeah.
They can get familiar with the catechism.
Sure. Yeah. That's something, by the way, we do stress in catechism. We are in the Bible every single week.
A lot of looking.
And you've noticed, and Mary Grace, I'm sure, has noticed, by the time they get to 3rd year, they become very comfortable getting around in the Bible.
The little ones we don't know as well.
Right, yeah, the little tiny books are tough. But
so you'll remove the hymnals?
No, not necessarily. We'll add 2. We don't need to get rid of the hymnals. Although, to be fair, we don't use the hymnals.
Well,
but we still want them there.
But to replace one hymnal with the Bible, because, you got to make space.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
That would be fine. Some people will look at the Bible. For me, I just typically just close my eyes and listen. Because this you do at home an awful lot, but to hear someone else say it, you don't hear very often. So.
The other possibility that we're looking at is having different translations of the Bible infused. So you would be able, while hearing the new Revised Standard Version, which is what we always print, you can look at the Bible and see a different version. It might bring up ideas and questions you wouldn't have thought of.
Do we use the green and blue hymnals, or do we just use the red ones?
I use the green one.
We use the green and blue here.
We're doing a print.
Most of the hymns that we are printing are from the new red, or cranberry, they call it, cranberry hymn.
Should we just do those?
Well, we don't have enough red ones to put in the pews, and they're kind of expensive. And since we already print everything in the bulletins, why bother getting them?
Well, there's prayers in the green hymnal before communion and after communion. I use mine every communion.
Good.
We
Fantastic.
just never use the blue hymnal. So it'd be
Yeah, we might be, put the Bibles in place of the blue hymnals, perhaps something like that. Okay. Continuing. For equipping, offer communion more frequently. We've noticed that, there are some people that just won't be here every Sunday. Either their work doesn't permit it, they're a nurse or an EMT or something like that, or they're children who are in blended families, and so they're here only, 1 or 2 Sundays a month. And so, by only offering communion twice a month, they may not be able to have communion for months at a time because they just hit on the wrong Sundays. And so we're looking to offer it more frequently, moving towards communion every Sunday, but we're not going to go there right now. So, next one, and this will be something we'll do with Bible studies and such, is encourage folks to use the 7 discipleship practices in their daily lives. These are practices that we're all called to use in one form or another. ELCA developed this list, but pray daily, worship weekly, read the Bible daily, study, to serve others, to invite others, to encourage, and to give, both of time, talent, and treasure. So, 7 discipleship practices. Next, focus especially on equipping our young people through Sunday school, read children's church, catechism, 3 points. All of these, equipping them to be disciples is key. So we want that focus. And then finally, under the give portion of discipleship, using annual stewardship campaigns to encourage people to deepen their discipleship through their giving. One interesting thing, there's been a change in emphasis with stewardship in the ELCA the last few years. I've been doing a lot of reading and a lot of training on stewardship through my synod role. And there's been a shift from stewardship campaigns to get more money. We need more money. Shifting to, what does it mean to be a good steward? You know, the giving is an expression of our lives as stewards of all that God has given us. I think that's a really good shift. And so we'll be emphasizing that through our campaigns in the years ahead. Any
Before you
questions?
go to the next slide, let's go back up to offer communion more frequently.
Please.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but did a couple of years ago the congregation was not in favor of communion every Sunday?
Correct. They were not in favor of communion every Sunday. It failed in the vote. It was a narrow piece.
So what's the change in philosophy now?
Well, part of the change in philosophy is you have a new pastor. Part of it,
And the reason for not having it every Sunday was?
It loses its importance.
it's not as special.
How?
Well, that's that's an important question to be addressed. That's why with the newsletter articles this summer, I addressed that. There's several things to be addressed. One is that question of specialness. One of them is that it gives more work to the altar guild because they have to. But one thing we're going to do with that to help them is we're going to do communion by intinction some Sundays so they don't have to set up all the little cups as frequently. So there are some things, but on the specialness piece, communion.
And the congregations I'm coming from, it was just the complete opposite. It's like, how do you worship and celebrate God if you don't worship and celebrate God? Sorry.
No, it's okay.
A little bit of a shock here as
Well,
far as culture.
Sure. Well, let me give some background, I think, on it. For many, many generations here in America, communion was celebrated once a month.
Right.
And the reason for that, though theological reasons got attached to it, the reason that was the case was practical. There weren't enough pastors.
Right.
And so what happened was pastors would ride a circuit between churches and visit them about once a month. And you couldn't have communion unless a pastor was present. And so that was why it was once a month. It was a practical thing originally. But from the earliest times, we think communion was practiced every week. If we look in the Bible, there are hints of it. There's a text called the Didache, which dates to about 150 AD, where they do say they practice it every week. At the time of the Reformation, it says actually in the Book of Concord that we Lutheran pastors subscribe to, Mass is celebrated every Sunday in our churches. And so it's there as well. In Martin Luther's day, it was every Sunday. The specialness piece, part of the way I like to look at it is many families, or some families, still gather as families after worship on Sunday. You know, they'll gather together for Sunday evening meal, big family gathering. If they do it every Sunday, does it make it less special? I don't think so. I think many of them, they love that regularity of it. And so, for me, moving towards more frequent communion, you know, this is a gift of grace that God gives us. And it is an invitation. No one has to come. They don't have to come every Sunday. But I hope that kind of helps address for you some of the concerns with the specialness.
Well, there's another side of it too. I remember when he had to work Sundays and I didn't have a car, I went with my sister-in-law to church. And you had to follow that bulletin because otherwise you were lost, because they didn't do the same thing Sunday after Sunday. And when you do this, a lot of times you just, you automatically say what you're supposed to say because you know it, you go every Sunday. And I think that's where people get the feeling with communion. The fear of it being just something you do, you know.
Well, then you can say that about church. Welcome to church every Sunday.
Well, and I think that begs an important question for us. And that is, how do we make worship more meaningful? You know, that's part, just because we are the actors in it and we're not the audience, doesn't mean that we shouldn't be fed by it. And if we've done the same thing for 10 straight years, it can be so rote that it does get boring. That's why we're looking at going to a new liturgy here before too long, that sort of thing. It's precisely to keep some.
I think, just tweaking the service to keep it fresh and alive is enough. but it really scared